Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of congregational humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you this morning to bring in the new year out of an abundance of caution. It's so important that we protect and care for the most vulnerable among us, and that's a story we need to keep on telling. After all that we are is stories. We are called to listen to the stories we tell about ourselves and about our world, to embrace them if they're still relevant, and to change them if they're not. Here again is a quote from the Nigerian storyteller Ben Okri that was included in what Valerie read earlier. One way or another, we are living the stories planted in us early or along the way. We are also living the stories we planted, knowingly or unknowingly, in ourselves. We live stories that either give our lives meaning or negate it with meaninglessness. If we change the stories we live by, quite possibly we change our lives. Do you think of your life as a story? Be it one that you're writing or that was written for you? And what about the life of this congregation? How are you participating in writing its story? From time to time, I post pictures of my parents on Facebook at those times of the year that mark anniversaries of their births or their deaths. Last week, I could have posted a photo of my mom because December 29th would have been her 99th birthday. She died 27 years ago. In those posts, I often comment about how I carry my parents' stories in the stream that is my life. Their stories have played crucial roles in the unfolding of my own story. They suggested hopes for how my plot line would unfurl. And although I diverged from that narrative, still, always, the impact of my parents' presence and spirit impacts every new page that I write. And being aware of that impact helps me to be clear about the story I want my life to tell and the stories by which I choose to live my life. Last Sunday, you heard, or can hear in the recording of that assembly, the words of some of the parents of this congregation, and in particular about their hopes and visions for how FUS would overcome and move through the hardships of their times during abolition, the Great Depression, McCarthyism, and following 9/11. The stories of our ancestors teach us that we have been here before, we have faced hard times before, and we can learn from the stories of the past, stories that have been planted in us even from before our birth. But we're also living the stories we ourselves plant and choose. There are multiple stories living in each of us, some of them planted very deeply, others that are triggered only during specific times, some that seem contradictory. Maybe just take a moment to think about the stories you tell that guide your life. Here are a few examples. The world is going to hell in a handbasket, or some other version of the sky is falling. Whatever else, whatever happens, I can trust that the universe is holding me. All shall be well. Things have a way of working out. Humanity never learns. We keep repeating the same mistakes. The moral arc of the universe is long, and it is bending toward justice. We got this, which is the story Phil told about managing without me this morning. The stories we tell and retell shape our behaviors and our outlooks. I wonder why we don't more consciously choose and use stories to give structure and direction to our lives. Stories can help us understand how we came to be who we are, what behaviors and outlooks we might want to change, and who we want to become. Stories give us meaning and purpose. Indeed, the ability to craft stories to intentionally guide us is one of the great gifts of being human. It sounds simple and beautiful, even cathartic. But telling our own story can be difficult, in part because we can be too close to see that whole arc of our narrative. And telling our story is complicated by the reality that there's just not one book inside of us. We are full libraries containing coming-of-age stories and mysteries and love stories and adventure stories and victim narratives and heroes' journeys. So choosing which story to tell and teasing out the overarching motifs or finding the life-giving threads requires our careful attention. Of course, we simultaneously play multiple roles as well. We're the principal actor who has singular personality traits, who has a unique way of interacting with the world, and who lives with chosen or prescribed expectations that are built into our circumstances. In addition, we're the agent in our story, which is to say that we're responsible for making decisions that will change the course of the plot, hopefully in the direction we choose. And finally, we're also the editor of our story. We're the ones who must bundle it all together in a cohesive meta-narrative that's most authentic to the life we choose. And we sort our lives into chapters and stories. This is how we tell others about ourselves. Stories is how humans communicate. In order to make connections and have relationships, we have to tell little pieces of our story about where we've come from, who we are, where we're going. Yet, as Emily Dickinson so wisely advised, tell the truth, but tell it slant. We hold the power to choose the slant, the tilt, the lens through which we tell our stories. And while we're creatures of habit, we are not destined to keep repeating what's always been. While there are many parts of our story we have not intentionally planted or determined, there are always options to chart a different course. The past can be rewritten to serve both the present and the future. Jonathan Adler, a professor of psychology, says that a life story is written in chalk, not ink, and it can be changed. Written in chalk. We take from all that surrounds us, fictional tales, news articles, family apocrypha, and whether consciously or not, we weave it all together to make meaning, crafting a worldview that shapes how our life unfolds. Stories are life. Life is stories. All we are is stories. Now, here's an example from my life. As many of you know, I have 5 brothers and sisters, and although we were raised by the same parents, and although only 11 years separates oldest to youngest, we have very different stories to tell about our childhoods. For many years, I told my story as one in which I was not seen and was not loved for who I am. I told a story in which my parents, while good-intentioned, spiritually abused me. I told that story repeatedly. So it came as a great surprise to me to learn that my youngest sister carries a story in which she had parents, the same 2 people, who loved her unconditionally. Now, I have taken her story and I've placed it alongside mine, and I've turned it over and over, and I've come to accept that both stories contain a bit of truth and a bit of slant. And in that examination, the victim I was in my story receded a bit. As my story interacted with that of my sisters, I was able to let go of the blaming. I also came to see my parents more fully as people with big hearts who just didn't know how to love me in the way that I needed. I now choose to believe that they would have loved me differently if only they'd had that skill. And somehow, this retelling of my story lays a better foundation for who I wish to be and become. It's freeing, and therefore it's a much better story for me. Now, you may well contain a story of abuse or hurt that cannot be retold in a similar way. You may still need bits of that story just as they are in order to survive. Your story is yours to change or to reimagine as you choose. Professor Adler, who I mentioned earlier, has noticed two themes in people's stories that tend to correlate with better well-being: agency, or feeling that you're in control of your life, and communion, or feeling that you have good relationships in your life. Having agency and finding communion support well-being. Well-being comes when we know that there's something we can do to change the story, and when we reach out to others to connect. So if your meta-narrative isn't life-giving for you, how might you change it? If the narrative of this community, this congregation, is not fostering vitality and well-being, what do we need to do about that? I think what really matters is whether we can make something meaningful and coherent out of what's happened to and around us. This is the human journey, right? What are we to do? Who are we to be? What is the larger story of which we're a part? After all we are is stories. What's the story of this congregation? In addition to all of your individual stories, there are also collective stories this congregation tells. Insomuch as you continue to tell them, I believe they influence who you are to become, because the stories we live by help to create what is to be. So take care to tell the stories that are life-giving. Some of the stories I've heard here are: this is a predominantly white and privileged congregation, with the tagline, sometimes, that it's always going to be that way. We do not know how to deal with conflict. There's lots of money here, but we hoard it. Or, alternatively, there's not enough money for what we need to do. We're not like a church. There are certain words and worldviews that are not tolerated, and keeping those things out is the only way to feel belonging here. FUS has an important message and a perspective that's lacking in the world. There are lots of people who just need to find us. Folks here are generous and creative, and we always find a way. I invite you to think about some of the stories this congregation tells about itself. In the coming months, we'll be exploring some of these and other stories to pay attention to how they might be serving you, and to begin to craft new stories for the future, new stories for a new year, stories that clearly name who you want to be, stories that are already expressed in some part in your mission statement, your aspirations, and in the shared values of Unitarian Universalism. Especially in these times, when it seems that hatred, lies, and power-mongering is on the rise, it's time to claim the stories you want to tell. The life-giving, justice-affirming, loving stories. The stories that bring you together in a supportive, creative, and resilient community. May we live in accord with these stories, that we might use our intelligence and goodwill to create the world we wish to see, a world we choose to live, a world in which we choose to live the stories in which we make a sustained effort to make a difference, of making the sustained effort to help. So now, you've heard the truth about stories. Do with it what you will. Just don't say in the years to come that you would have lived your life differently if only you had known. You've heard it now. So be it.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.